On September 11th, 2001, a small town in rural western Pennsylvania became part of American history in a most tragic way. In a field in an abandoned mine located in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, United Flight 93 violently crashed, killing the 40 passengers and crew, along with the evil terrorists responsible for the hijacking of the plane. It is difficult to do justice to the story of the Flight 93 National Memorial in 10 to 12 minutes, but it is important to keep the story of Flight 93 alive. The morning of September 11th, 2001, began as a rather normal morning for America until news of a plane crashing into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City emerged. It appeared at first to be an accident, yet no conditions were present that could necessarily cause such a horrific crash. After all, it was a clear day with no notable weather happening. Shortly after the plane crashed, members of the FBI in Pittsburgh gathered in their break room to discuss the event as they watched the coverage on TV. They witnessed the horror of a second plane hitting the South Tower. It became obvious that this was no accident. Gary Leone was a member of the FBI's evidence response team in Pittsburgh and recalled how they were immediately dispatched to New York City to begin assisting in rescue and recovery efforts. As they pulled out of their underground garage, a third plane crashed into the Pentagon. America was under attack. The team was rerouted to Somerset County, Pennsylvania, not fully aware of the reason. Completely unaware of the details, the team wondered how a plane crashing in the middle of nowhere could be more pressing than what was happening in New York City and Washington, D.C. According to Mr. Leone, a native of Cambria County, he said, "Being from around this area, there's not anything of that scale like the World Trade Center in Somerset, Pennsylvania." As local, state, and federal emergency response crews arrived on scene at Shanksville, they did not see a plane or even big pieces of a plane. They saw a giant crater in the ground and smoke and fires in the nearby woods. The smell of jet fuel and death permeated the air. Everybody on scene was desperate to help in any way they could. With no large visible pieces of a plane, the crater remained, not realizing that the crash and most of the plane had gone into the ground. With smoke and fires in the nearby woods and the size of the crater, it became obvious this was no longer about rescue. It was going to be about recovery. Nobody could have survived this treacherous impact. Despite the chaos and so much still unknown, the agencies organized, and shortly thereafter, then Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge arrived at the site to be briefed by officials on what they knew at this point. United Flight 93 crashed after having been hijacked by terrorists. The attack was in fact related to the earlier ones of the day in New York City and Washington, D.C. During his press conference, Governor Ridge stated, "There are certain preparations you can take, and I believe the federal government and respective states, as well as they can, do anticipate acts of terrorism, but there are such horrific events, unspeakable and unconscionable events such as this, and I'm not sure that you can ever adequately prepare for. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to fully comprehend, given our value system and the enormity of this tragedy we feel and experience. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to totally understand." As members of the evidence response team and other agencies, they began the grueling task of recovery, loading what items they could find in small, color-coded bins. They were desperate to find anything, be it parts of the plane, luggage to identify the victims, as well as body parts. The discovery of the flight recorder and cockpit voice recorder provided investigators with much needed intelligence on determining what exactly happened on United Flight 93, and also helped tie in the other events on September 11, 2001 that occurred in Washington, D.C. and New York City. As crews continued to look for evidence and recovery efforts continued, the family members would arrive on scene. Temporary memorials began to spring up around the area, and as the family arrived, Gary Leone of the FBI Evidence Response Team noted, "It was quiet for the first time since we had been there, and it was, looking up on the hill, seeing all the families see the site for the first time, and seeing where their loved ones had been, and knowing what their loved ones had done for this country was pretty powerful, pretty emotional." People began leaving different types of memorials, temporary memorials and mementos to honor the victims aboard Flight 93. And they also did it to honor the workers who were there collecting evidence. Mr. Leone stated, "One thing that I will forever be thankful for is the support of the community around this area, whether it's the schools with all the little kids making banners or people hanging their flags up and all the flags on their cars. We just saw countless numbers of signs in support of us as the FBI or the first responders or the collectors." The workers from various agencies, again, local, state, federal, all working together, pulling together, and being there for each other. It became obvious that this town, this location, would be forever changed. It was a place of heroes, a place of honor and respect for those who perished to save the lives of so many thousands of others. This aerial view of the site shows the crash site, along with where the temporary memorials were set up, along with the command center, and the area where the news media were. And all around the perimeter, the Pennsylvania State Police kept watch night and day, camping out the entire time that agencies were there for recovery. On September 24, 2002, Congress passed an act, Public Law 107-226, which stated to authorize a national memorial to commemorate the passengers and crew of Flight 93 who, on September 11, 2001, courageously gave their lives, thereby thwarting a planned attack on our nation's capital. On September 10, 2015, the permanent Flight 93 National Memorial opened its doors first to the family members of the Flight 93 victims. Outside the visitor center, one can walk over to the lookout where the unforgettable words state, "A common field one day, a field of honor forever," looking out into the field of where Flight 93 crashed. Even with all of the work that has gone into making the permanent Flight 93 National Memorial, the site continues to honor the original temporary memorials established immediately after the crash. Inside the visitor center, you can also witness all of the various artifacts and story of Flight 93. As you walk down to Memorial Plaza, which stands before the crash site, the final place of rest for the victims of Flight 93, visitors can pause and reflect or walk alongside the hallowed landscape of the nearby crash site, where a massive boulder remains in the sacred field of where the impact occurred. As you continue on, you will arrive at the Wall of Names. It should be noted that the path for The Flight 93 National Memorial marks the flight path of Flight 93. On the wall of names, you will see the name for each victim from Flight 93, and oftentimes you will find various artifacts and mementos left by family members, friends, and even strangers for the victims of Flight 93. Finally, there stands the Tower of Voices. It is a living memorial which stands 93 feet tall and holds 40 wind chimes in honor of the crew and passengers. It was later added to the Flight 93 National Memorial, dedicated on September 10, 2020. And so, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, once an unknown, random small town in rural western Pennsylvania, became a battlefield on September 11, 2001, as 40 brave passengers and crew members became the ultimate heroes by stopping a large-scale terrorist attack. They sacrificed their lives to save thousands of others. The battlefield is now a cemetery, a place to honor and pay respect to the heroes of United Flight 93.